One cold night in 1936, while driving through the Willowbrook Ballroom on Archer Avenue, the driver of a small truck noticed a girl in a white ball gown and dancing shoes on the side of the road. It was very cold, and the man decided to give the poor girl a ride. The girl must have been very cold and seemed very silent. Near the Resurrection Cemetery, she suddenly asked to stop. There were no residential buildings around, and while the driver was trying to see around, the girl disappeared as if she had disappeared into the night. On a raging Chicago night with a howling wind, I first saw the Cemetery of Resurrection sung in the song Resurrection of Mary by Ian Hunter, which was included in his 1996 album, The Artful Sly. The story of Chicago's most famous ghost is so famous that it even influenced the British classic rock singer. It is on chilly Chicago nights that the ghost of a blue-eyed beauty with short 1920-era blonde curls is seen on Archer Avenue, dressed in a white cocktail dress. Sometimes she is picked up by taxi drivers, police, and motorists who watch her disappear as she approaches the cemetery. The Legend of Mary from the Cemetery Resurrection. The 1920s bubbled up in Chicago like good champagne released from a bottle. Prohibition was working at full capacity. The bars that sold illegal liquor were run by notorious thugs like Al Capone and John Torrio, and jazz was played on dance floors. It was a time of decline. In Willow Springs, another suburb of Chicago, at 8,900 kilometers of Archer Avenue, there was O. Henry Ballroom. Built in 1921 by the Werteber family, this building was known as the club of the country's best ballroom dancers. In downtown Chicago, there were always bus and tram stops in front of the O. Henry. It is here, at the O. Henry, in the late 1920s, that the story of Mary's ghost begins. Legend has it that Mary went to a dance with her beau. They quarreled and Mary ran out into the cold winter night in a light dress and dancing shoes. The girl began to walk up and down the road to stop a passing car on Archer Avenue. But she didn't manage to get home. She was hit to death by a speeding car in the night. She was buried at the Resurrection Cemetery in a white dance dress and dancing shoes. Resurrection is a relatively modern Catholic cemetery. The earliest tombstones date back to the 1890s. Archer Avenue has a large entrance with wrought iron gates suspended from cement posts. In the center of the cemetery stands a large mausoleum, and on its territory there are numerous family crypts. Like all old cemeteries, it resembles a large park. The first appearances of the Blonde Mary began around 1928 or 1929. She often appeared in the winter months December, January and February, most likely during this period of time she was hit by a car. Although there were times in the late 1920s and early 1930s when a woman could be seen voting on Archer Avenue, the most striking encounter with Mary was at Jerry Palis in 1939. Palis had been out of town for a while and hadn't heard of the legend of the resurrected Mary yet. One winter night, Palis went dancing at Liberty Grove and Hall, which was located just off 47th Street. He never remembered seeing a striking blonde woman enter the building, but when he turned around, she was there. In subsequent interviews, he recalled that her skin was cold, and at the end of the evening, when he kissed her, her lips were also cold and wet. When the dance was over, the girl asked Palis to take her home and gave her the address. When they got into Palis's car, she said she wanted to drive down Archer Avenue to an address that was significantly different from the one she had given him. When they passed the gates of the Resurrection Cemetery, Mary asked Palis to stop the car. He said he didn't understand why this girl wanted to get out of the car at this point. Palis related words. "I need to get out here, but don't follow me." The young man was puzzled to see her run to the cemetery gate and disappear before his eyes. The next day, Palis went to the address the girl had given him the night before. The woman in the house told him that he couldn't have been with the charming beauty last night because she died more than 10 years ago. Then Palis saw in the house a portrait of the girl with whom he had danced. A few years later, the man could not remember the address he went to the next day, but the other details of the evening remained in his memory. Jerry Palis never made money from his story and never tried to present what happened as a feat. Jerry Palis died in 1992, never changing his story. Mary's resurrection is such a part of Chicago folklore that it's hard to know who to believe and who just attracts attention. Mary's ghost was also described by a guy who was driving along Archer Avenue with his girlfriend at night. They saw a woman in a white dress on the side of the road, staggering towards their car and then disappearing. The most interesting thing about this story was that his girlfriend was the only one who actually confirmed the story. She was an immigrant from a Slavic country, recently arrived in America, and barely spoke English. Moreover, she had never heard of Mary's resurrection, and yet she had seen her. On January 31, 1979, an article by reporter Bill Geist of the Chicago Tribune referred to a taxi driver who gave only his first name, Ralph. Ralph explains how he got lost after dropping off a passenger after midnight on a Thursday in mid-January 1979 and turning onto Archer Avenue to find out where he was. According to Geist's report, Ralph said she was standing there without a coat at the entrance to this small store. Without a coat. It was bitterly cold that night. She didn't vote, didn't do anything. Just looking at my car. Of course I stopped. I thought maybe there were problems with transport or something. She jumped into the front seat. She was wearing this fancy white dress, like she was at a wedding, and new lace-up dancing shoes. She was beautiful, blonde. I had nothing on my mind. She was much younger than me, and old enough to be my daughter, 21 at the most. Ralph went on to say that the girl seemed rather unemotional, saying nothing except, "It snowed early this year." Ralph continued. 2 miles up Archer, at the cemetery, she jumped up like a horse and said, "Here. Here." I hit the brakes, looked around, and saw no house. "Where?" I asked. She held out her hand, pointed across the road to my left, and said, "There." I looked to my left, like this, at this little house. When I turned around, she was gone. The car door didn't open. I swear it didn't open. Mary's ghost also left material evidence of its presence. In the early 1980s, a man drove past the cemetery and saw a woman locked in the cemetery after it was closed. It never occurred to him that it was a ghost. He thought that someone had been left in the cemetery and needed help. The man went straight to the police station for help. The police arrived at the cemetery and did not notice anyone. But they found that the iron bars next to the cemetery gate had been bent, apparently by human hands. The bars were blackened and burned, and there were notches on them that looked like fingers. Cemetery workers said that this was done by a truck that allegedly performed collector work and drove the body into the bars, after which they tried to align the bars with a blowtorch and asbestos gloves. When you look at how high up from the ground the prints are, it's impossible for a truck to drive in and bend the bars just in that small place. It will not bend certain bars inward and bend others in the opposite direction. The prints that were there at first were not those of a blowtorch. But this is so, by the way. From the mid-1970s to the present day, visions of a resurrected Mary have become a little frightening. Some people driving along Archer Avenue said they saw a woman in white speeding in front of their cars. Some motorists said they hit the girl, but they didn't find the body, while others said the ghost went right through the car. One night in the neighboring cemetery bar, about 3 a.m., bullet flew the driver of the truck. The boy was really hysterical. He told Chast that he hit a girl on the road and could not find her, and did not understand what to do. All the bartender could do was convince the guy that he didn't hit anyone. However, the driver was so sure that this was actually happening that he could not calm down for quite a long time. Mary's resurrection is a classic American ghost story, but who was Mary really? Paranormal investigators went all over the cemetery and found a tombstone with the name of Mary Bregovy, who died on March 10, 1934. Although the last name matches, the date of death is close to when the first sightings were reported. But Mary Bregovy was a dark-haired woman who died in downtown Chicago, not on the street of Archer Avenue. Chicago writer Ursula Belsky in 1999 discovered another girl, Anna Maria Norkus, who died in a 1927 car accident while returning from a ballroom dance. It is very difficult to detect the resurrection of Mary by any means of investigation, because it appears at a distance of a half-mile on Archer Avenue between the cemetery Rebrection and O'Henry Ballroom, now Willowbrook Ballroom. Dale Kaczmarek is the president of the Society for Ghost Research, author of the book Ghosts of the Windy City, Whitechapel Productions, and has been researching supernatural phenomena since 1975. I talked to Kaczmarek about his results on the resurrected Mary. Kaczmarek has noticed Mary's disappearance since the mid-1990s. He attributes the lower frequency of ghost sightings, as one possible reason, to streetlights installed by the city, which make Acre Avenue a much brighter night spot. The question of who the resurrected Mary really was will probably not be answered, but she is tied to the South Chicago side until today. Those who drive past the cemetery on Archer Avenue on a cold winter night can't help but look for a blonde woman in a white dress. Maybe she's shivering from the cold, or maybe she's waiting to dance one last time in the local halls. Enjoy her presence before she disappears. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss more videos of mysterious stories and photos. Check out this playlist and I'll see you in the next video.